Crystal. Yeah, so welcome everybody to the talk today on data sharing for freshwater health. As Crystal said, I'm Patrick LeClair. I'm a data specialist with the Gordon Foundation. I'm joining you all here from Chibuktuk in Mi'kma'ki, the unceded and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq, or some of you may know it, Halifax, Nova Scotia. So a little bit of background on the Gordon Foundation, so who I'm here on behalf of. We're a 55-year-old charitable organization. We're based out of Toronto. We have two main programs. One is our Northern program, where we work with partners in Canada's north, a lot of Indigenous partners, and the other is our water program. And our water program, its main flagship initiative is DataStream, which is an open access portal for water quality data, which we'll talk about later on in this presentation. So to get started, I just kind of wanted to talk a bit about freshwater health, which I think for this crowd is a pretty, I think we all understand the importance of it. But for many people, we can throw a lot of numbers out. I've heard already today things like, Canada has 20% of the world's freshwater resources. We can also look at the fact that we use over 4.8 trillion liters of water back in 2017. And we can look at the grand scope geographically of having, more than 1,300 different water basins in Canada. While these numbers are all, really impressive, it doesn't really get to the heart of, what freshwater role it plays in Canada. Some other things we can look at is we can look at maybe, freshwater is really important. It plays a big role for us in extracurriculars or, maybe a calm, peaceful spot that's really meaningful to you personally. But it's also really important for culture and also livelihoods for many different groups across Canada and Indigenous peoples as well. It also plays a big role in power generation, especially in Ontario with Ontario Hydro. And it also is, needed to help bring foods to our table. So with fresh water being so important, the big question comes: how can we ensure that how can we ensure Canada's long-term freshwater health? And even those things I talked about before don't even fully encapsulate how important it is, because water really is life. So what can we do to ensure the life of Canada and of our waters? Well, today I'm going to talk to you about one perspective, and that's in terms of data sharing. Now, definitely data sharing is not often people's first knee-jerk reaction when they're talking about freshwater health and preserving freshwater in Canada, but I'm hoping I can show you all today its importance. So we're going to start by kind of defining the two terms just so we understand what kind of footing we're on. So in terms of data, what I mean is I'm really talking in this presentation around Western science data. So this is mostly quantitative, and we're looking at measurements in the field, could be sent to a lab, could be done with some kind of sensor. We're getting a value at a time and a place when we're recording that. Now, this isn't to say that this is the only type of data that's important. There's some really other important ones, are traditional, ecological, and Indigenous knowledge, which could have an entire presentation in and of itself, and qualitative data as well, photos, videos, stories. Those are really important data sources, and I'm not trying to downplay them at all. It's just we don't have time to cover everything today, so we're going to be focusing on the more Western science and quantitative data. And the next thing is, what we mean by sharing. So the first thing when we talk about sharing, especially in terms of data in Canada, is to understand the vast size of our country and the cross-jurisdictional nature of water. We're looking across municipal boundaries, even across countries. And watersheds, don't adhere to these boundaries. Water doesn't hit a provincial line and then stay within the province. So we need to really be good at sharing and communicating across these different boundaries. So sometimes also describing what something isn't is sometimes a good way to understand more what it should be or what it is. And what I mean by sharing isn't some of the things you see here. Sharing isn't having a file cabinet full of paper files anymore. It's not, having the data on an old computer that has one person who can access it, a shoebox in the closet, we get that a lot. And it's also, too, not having a million different spreadsheets all over the place. What we're really looking at in terms of sharing And what we use to guide our kind of approach to it are these FAIR principles. Generally, these FAIR principles are just trying to say that data should be findable, accessible. It should be easy to go out, find where the data is, then freely access it and reuse it over and over again to get the most use out of that data. So sharing isn't just, having it, but it's also making sure that everybody can access it and to minimize the barriers to access. So what are some kind of case studies where we look at data sharing and people trying to use data to determine freshwater health? So one example that you may have seen from our presentation this morning is the World Wildlife Fund's Watershed reports. So these were done in 2007, and their goal was to, in 2017, sorry, and their goal was to complete the first Canada-wide assessment of the country's watersheds. So it's a really lofty goal and really valiant and really important, right? By doing a big nationwide study, we can then determine where areas of need are and ensure that the resources are going to the areas that most need it. However, they didn't quite get the result they were looking for. Now in science, a null result or a result that, gives you the opposite of what you're looking for can still be something that can be used and knowledge can be gained from that. And what we found here is that actually the majority of watersheds in Canada were found to be data deficient. So this just meant that they didn't have enough information in these watersheds to make the decisions on whether the water quality was good or bad. And by not being able to make the decisions on the quality of the water, it's then hard to determine, where can we put our time and effort and resources. Another case study here was a study done by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, where they were looking at secondary uses of water quality data. So what they mean by a secondary use is I've gone out, I've done a study, I've collected data, I come back, somebody else then contacts me, gets that data, and then wants to reuse it for another project. How effectively can they reuse that data? This is really important because collecting water data is very expensive, but also when you collect it at that one point in time, you can never go back and get it again, right? That day, that time, and that water that you were sampling will never happen. You can't retroactively go and get that data. So it's really important to ensure that that data can be reused over and over. Well, what they found from this study, which was very troubling, was that they found that $12 billion were determined to be ambiguous. So what this meant is that $12 billion of the data were actually couldn't be reused because people were unable to determine what actually was meant in the data. There wasn't enough metadata and information surrounding it for people to comfortably reuse it. This was in contrast to only $8 billion that was unambiguous and actually usable. So this showed that, a lot of the data, while there may be a lot of collection, there's not a lot of thoughts on how can I share this knowledge and how can I pass this on and down so that other people can use it for decision making. So looking at those two studies, we can kind of see two really key issues here. One is data quantity. So just that we don't have enough data, whether it be that there's not enough sampling happening or that data isn't being shared properly. And the second is data quality. We don't have some kind of standardization which allows people to easily pass and understand the data from one person to another. So looking at these two issues, the Gordon Foundation has kind of come at this through a platform that I mentioned earlier, DataStream. So DataStream is an open access water quality platform. It's free and open for anybody to use. Our big thing is it's a map-based search. So you can go in, you can click around the map, find a lake, river, watershed that you're interested in, see who's monitoring in that area, go in and then do some quick visualizations to get a little bit of a determination of what the watershed health is. And then from there, download the data for further analysis. So where this kind of started from wasn't actually those two key issues. We didn't look at those two key issues and say, how can we solve this? Instead, it actually started with a partnership with the government of the Northwest Territories. The GNWT was actually looking at starting a community-based monitoring program where they would train people all across the territory. They would sample water in their communities. They'd send it back to the government. The government would then analyze it and then send those results out to all the communities. Being, a region as large as the Northwest Territories and as many jurisdictions as there are and a lot of rural communities, this was, a pretty big undertaking. And they needed somewhere that they could easily host the data and then share it with their community partners so that they could then see what was happening in their community and reuse that data. Make sure it was open so the communities were getting the same access to the data as the government was. So this is where DataStream came as kind of a tool that we could use to connect those two groups. After doing that, however, and word getting out about DataStream, there gained to be a lot of interest from other regions in the country. The next region that we worked with was in Atlantic Canada, where I am here, and we partnered with the Atlantic Water Network, which is a not-for-profit based out of Halifax. And there was a lot of interest in this region for the same thing, a lot of monitoring happening, but people not really being able to share it, governments not knowing it existed or using it enough, and community partners not knowing what was happening the next watershed over. So we launched that data stream in June of 2018, and then we launched the newest data stream, Lake Winnipeg data stream, here in March of last year. Since the launch of these three different platforms, we now have over 9 million unique observations contributed by over 100 different groups across all of our three regions. What you'll notice here as well on the map is this Great Lakes data stream. So we're actually seeing a lot of interest again in Ontario and the Great Lakes region to come into the region and help with data sharing. And so we're actually looking at launching Great Lakes data stream in 2021. I'll talk a bit more about that later in the presentation and how you can get involved if you're interested. So looking at data stream, one of the big questions is, who contributes to this platform? So it's a really wide array of people, which is one reason we've been able to be so successful. So we've got everything from community groups and watershed organizations. We've got academics and researchers, Indigenous governments, provincial and territorial governments, as well as the federal government. So by having this wide variety of people, we're able to bring in all of this data and really make it so that you can look at your watersheds data next to maybe some researchers and the governments and get a full picture of what's happening, and also help to fill some of those data gaps. And what are these people contributing? Well, DataStream currently accepts over 6,000 different parameters, but currently we have over 200 stored in the system. Our main media types are water and sediment data. And from there, we take, lab data. So that's your nutrients, your metals, biological data, your E. coli. And we also take, common field parameters, pH, temperature, and DO. So with that being said, that's kind of, who's contributing and what, but I'm going to show you guys a little demo of the site so you guys can kind of see what it looks like in action. So what I've got open here is the homepage for Lake Winnipeg data stream. So that's the closest one kind of to your region. So you can see from the top here, we have some news, so you can find out what's happening with other groups in the region, or also what we're kind of up to. I recommend checking out the resources page. It's a great spot to find out how you can get involved and what needs to be done to get your data onto DataStream. As well, we have a lot of great resources there on community-based water monitoring if you're looking at even starting your own project. You can find out kind of more about DataStream and the initiative and what we're kind of working on and getting started with there. We've also too launched a new feature where you can actually see the site in French. So the site is now bilingual. So if you want to just go up there and you can change it into French as well. You can also check out some of our most up-to-date stories here on the homepage. So these are just some of our latest ones. You can also see a counter to see how much data is being collected by how many groups in your region. Also at the bottom, there's some other links. Some of the ones I just want to point out here that are key. One is subscribing to our newsletter. This is where you can find out more information about the launch of Great Lakes data stream and getting involved. We also have our office hours, which is at the first Wednesday of every month. We have an hour where you can come online and ask us questions and find out more about data stream. And you can also follow us on any of our social medias there as well. So that being said, we'll get into kind of the main part of the site, and this is our map. So if you go into the map, you'll see here there's a bunch of larger circles with numbers. So that shows you how many locations exist at each of these points. If I click on one of those, it'll actually take me down closer and expand further. And if you'll see these white, the solid points, that's actually a location. And if you hover over it, it'll give you the name. You can also turn on the watersheds, so you can see if you're unsure of which watershed you are in, you can do that. And you can also turn on the historical treaties as well to see which treaty you are involved in too. From the left, we also have a search option. So this is where you can filter and see which organizations are contributing to your hub. You can also filter by some of the common characteristics. These are just a short list, as well as by region. So watershed or province. Here we'll filter by Ontario, because that's where we're at today. And then on the left, it'll show you which data sets exist in your region. So we can see that there's 4, and as I hover over them, it'll show me where they're located on the map. For today, we'll look at this Provincial Water Quality Monitoring Network data set, just because that's for the province of Ontario, so it's a pretty robust data set. If we go in and kind of click on a point and get closer, then we can actually click on, there we go. We can actually click on a location. It'll tell us the name as well as the of the location, as well as the data set name. So if we click on the data set, it'll open it up. And it'll give us some visualization for that location. So here we're looking at the temperature data for that location from 1964 to 2020. So a lot of data here. If I hover over a point, it'll tell me the name of the location, the date it was collected, and the value. We can also turn on and off other locations, so you can actually cross-compare across a number of different data points. So if you're looking ones you know, or you can go to the map and add it to your comparison so you can see ones. As you'll notice from here that there's some that are in there, the Lake Winnipeg Basin, but there's also a number here in this grayed out area. This is because the data set goes beyond the Lake Winnipeg Basin into this, what will be Great Lakes Basin, but you can still view the data from that from the site. So you can still add that to your comparison and view data for your region from here. In addition to changing sites, you can also change parameters. So like I said, over 200, if you scroll through the list here, you can see a large number of them. We'll just click on pH here to see what another one looks like. You'll also notice these dotted lines. Those are actually the CCME, which is the Canadian Council for the Ministers of Environment. Their guidelines. We have the United States Environmental Protection Agency's guidelines as well. So you can quickly kind of toggle those on and off and see how your freshwater health is meeting against those guidelines for your locations. You can also, in addition to that, change your chart type. So one of the other really great ones is these box plots. It's a good way to just see any outliers and do some QA/QC if you are the data contributor, or see what kind of the mean and median is if you're looking at analyzing it. You can also change the media type. So like I said, we have surface water and sediment data. You can add your percentiles if that's something you're interested as well for some quick analysis, and toggle those on and off there. In addition to that, we also have, you can change the dates. You can also zoom in on a point. So if you're looking at a specific date and time, you can zoom in and then reset that. Yep, reset your axes and go back to kind of the full thing. You can also change the date here manually as well if there's a specific date range that you're looking at the data for. You can also take a photo of the graph. So if you get it to a graph that you're interested in and you think looks good, you can take a photo of that and save it and share it for later. We also have a statistics tab where you can just view some simple summary statistics for the different sites. You can download those as well. And then we've also added very new features, this explainer tab, which we're really excited about. This is where you can actually look at the characteristic and get some idea of what it is, why it's important, and how it's monitored. And this just gives people using the site some more context on what these different parameters are and why they should care about them. So we have it for a number of parameters, not all of them, but most of the common ones. So once you've kind of looked at the data and you've realized, okay, I wanna download this data set, it looks like something I'm interested in, you just click on the download button here. You don't have to have an account to download data. You don't have to pay anything. It's 100% free. So you can go in here, just agree to the terms of service, and then you click the download button, and you'll get the entire data set as well as another document, which gives you some more context on who collected the data, Also who to contact if you have any questions, and an abstract kind of telling you what's this program, why does it matter, why are they collecting the data here. So yeah, that's the abstract down there. You can also check out the DOI. So DOI is just a persistent identifier. If you're looking at citing it in any kind of research, you can put that in and then track the citations to see if your data is being used. So that's kind of a quick overview of the site. There's a lot of stuff there. I really recommend going and checking it out and clicking around and playing with it yourself. It's pretty user friendly. And the point of it is to, have a lot of engagement and allow it to be easy to engage with the platform. So where do we see DataStream kind of fitting in? So DataStream is kind of in this policy to action cycle. We see ourselves as kind of helping communities share their data so that that data can be then used for knowledge that'll lead to policy change that will then help the communities. So we don't actually collect any water quality data, but we do help others share this data and provide them support on uploading it as well. So if you do have historical data and you want to get it online, let us know and we can help you with that. So what does this look like? So a couple case studies we have. In Western PEI, as you see from the Watershed report, they were actually deemed as data deficient. Using DataStream, it was a catalyst to help a lot of the small watershed groups in that region come together and develop a monitoring program where they would all contribute the data to one data set. One of the groups that was higher capacity has a data person now who will actually get all the data, collect it, format it, and upload it to the site. And this way, all of that data can be shared and help reduce the data deficiency in that region. Another is in New Brunswick with the Passamaquoddy group. They were starting up a new water monitoring program, and they wanted to find a way that they could maximize the efficacy of their program. So they looked into their region, and they saw actually that there was a lot of monitoring happen that they didn't know about. So what they did is they decided then to put their program so they were monitoring in places that were high need that other people weren't monitoring. So now they're able to actually compare their data with other people who are collecting data in their region and get a better picture without having to recreate efforts and be sampling at the same spot. The third is the Lake Winnipeg Foundation. So we work with them to get their large data set online, and then they take this data and analyze it to put out reports on the health of the watershed and mostly around phosphorus as well. So what are kind of the next steps? So in terms of us, our next steps, we're always looking to get more data online, whether it be from governments, community groups, private entities. We're always looking to get as much data together because by aggregating this data and providing a hub, we're hoping that it will allow people to do more analysis and get a better picture of freshwater health in Canada. We're looking to always promote standards. We believe standardization of water quality will make it easier to share. And we're always adding new tools and features to the site. So we're always developing, and this is a consistent program. It's not like we just built this and we're done with it. We're always working at adding new features. But now in terms of for you guys, if you guys are data collectors, some next steps I would recommend is, adopting standards, looking for other water quality standards for data and making sure your data is in a usable model. Practicing good data management. If you check out our datastream.org webinars page, we actually did a webinar on data management that I would recommend checking out. It's also on our YouTube channel. And then openly sharing your data. We've seen so much success now and openness, and there's a lot of hesitance from a lot of people at first, but we've seen nothing but positive outcomes so far from sharing all this data. And if you're a community organizer, look at creating water monitoring programs if there isn't one in your region, and there are areas that it could be helpful to get a fuller picture. And then also, use DataStream to review and analyze the data to get a better picture of the health. I saw somebody earlier today in another talk ask, what are the main issues that we need to be focusing on? And it's really hard to pinpoint that because we don't have data a lot of the time to make those decisions. So by collecting and looking at the data and trying to use it, hopefully we can make some of those better calls and put our efforts into the areas that are most needed. So in terms of Great Lakes data stream, like I mentioned before, we're launching this here next year in the region, and we're looking for early adopters. So if you are collecting data or plan on collecting data or are just starting a program or know somebody who's collecting data, any of the above, we're looking for you. We want to help you get your data online. We'll work with you through the whole process, provide training and resources. So if you want to get involved, email org, and we'll be happy to work with you. Also, stay connected. If you don't want to be an early adopter, but you are interested in Great Lakes Data Stream, follow us on social media, Twitter and Facebook, to get the most recent updates. You can also subscribe to our newsletter. This is the link here, or as I mentioned before, you can do it from the bottom of our site. And also check out one of our 3 hubs as well. So with that being said, thank you guys all for coming to this talk. Yeah, I'm gonna open it. Maybe I'll look at some of your questions from before in the chat, but also if you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and I'll be happy to answer them now. Okay, so going back, so somebody had asked, NASA or National Geographic have data on where in danger of being overexploited quantity versus world in danger of being overexploited. We haven't actually looked. I haven't heard of the NASA or National Geographic studies, so definitely will look into those and see what kind of regions and areas they've had difficulties with, because we're also always looking for where is there data deficiencies and putting our efforts into those regions. Am I aware of any data series over time on a given watershed or sub-watershed? That's a really great question. No, I mean, it depends on the watershed, right? Like, I mean, in Canada, there's a lot of different people collecting data. So in Ontario, your conservation authorities, there may be some conservation authorities that have that kind of data. I'd recommend probably starting there. And then, data series over time. The Water Survey of Canada has a really great one for flow. Environment Canada also has some data sets. I also recommend checking out the Provincial Water Quality Monitoring Network data set from the Government of Ontario. That's a huge data set, probably the largest one in Canada, and is really robust. Physical, chemical versus biological data, which is more sensitive? Yeah, physical, chemical data, we see a lot more people collecting it because it is the barrier to collecting it is definitely easier. Biological data, we see a lot through Cabin, which is a large program. I'd say they go hand in hand. We don't do the biological data because the Cabin database actually does a pretty good job with a lot of that. But yeah, you kind of need them both together, because if you see a degradation in biology, it's hard to make those calls on what's happening without the physical chemical data to back it up. Yeah, so I think that's all. Yeah, I think that's all the questions there. Definitely some comments around, ensuring governments are sharing their data. That's really, really integral. And that's why we're partnering with a lot of the governments, including the Government of Ontario, to help them share their data and get it out there and make it more accessible. Because there is a lot of data collection being done, but sometimes it's hard to find out where it's happening. And we're also working with Conservation Ontario as well, and hoping to work with a number of the CAs to share their data. So keep your eyes open for Great Lakes Data Stream next year. And yeah, I was happy. Thank you to the Wellington Water Watchers for having me here today to present to all of you.